This is a beautiful picture of an area off the coast of Ireland, the top of Diamond Hill, in a place known as Connemara National Park in Ireland. It's where we ended part one. If you haven't seen part one yet, you can go to the end of the series and pull up part one because you'll have missed the first part of it if you don't. And each successive part will be in your top left-hand corner of each one continuing. Though we're talking about Atlantis and kind of strange stories and everything, this also has certain meaning for me, for I have an Irish heritage to myself, and I find that this name has a name connected to my family. It also connects it to the ocean because mare means ocean. One wonders how many times a little boat like this, if you can see it, has pulled up to a harbor here into this beautiful looking harbor. And perhaps somebody ran down this path looking onward and seeing them come in, ran back down the path to tell people someone was coming, or for other reasons entirely. One wonders if this path was used in a time during the last ice age that this whole area of water would have also been land, and it wouldn't have been overlooking a harbor. For as far as the ice stretches, and these little islands and islets you see right out here were all connected by land at one time. And though I've seen pictures of around this area, I never have quite seen this picture and thought upon it in that way. And after doing part one and sitting here and get ready for part two, I sat here as I do sometimes for quite a period of time and texted back and forth to a friend, but also had all kinds of thoughts rolling through my mind about my ancient people and people that had come before me, and not just my parents and not just my grandparents, but people long, long ago. So let's get into this part two here, where we're revealing connections that this university is making now professionally and outwardly on the connections of it, the tales of ancient Atlantis, and how it connects to the ancient land of Ireland and the Irish. Part three of this, I go into genetics and connections, and more connections than they do in these part one and two on the Egyptians and so on, but we'll get there. Plato's Atlantis had a temperate climate capable of producing 2 crops per year. Ireland is one of the most temperate climates on Earth, and it to this day is capable of producing 2 crops a year, winter and spring barley. Meanwhile, Ireland's seed fields are said to be the oldest agricultural fields on Earth. And there's a contest now whether or not this had to do simultaneously with the people at Cataclysmic and places that started to do it. And in looking at the old ancient tales, there were ancient tales of farmers and ancient tales of cattle people, and they got into a fight with each other, but regardless of the outcome of that, they ended up becoming both. For they go together, and now it's really synonymous if we think about it. And people that run farms, unless it's a giant farm that just grows corn and these type of things, or one that specializes in cattle, it should probably contain both, for they sustain themselves but also feed a community at the same time. It's quite amazing. It's much more abundant than somebody having a few plants out in their backyard, or tomatoes growing up out of pots. But you wonder if you see anything like that in ancient folklore and tales, and I'm here to tell you that in the Bible's first section of Genesis, they tell you that Adam and Eve had 2 children, Cain and Abel. And though you know the story of Cain slew Abel, whenever you look at the idea of what that they fielded and what that they harvested and things, and gave their offerings to God, God was more pleased in one than the other. And oh, it caused a big problem, Cain slew Abel, and so on goes out of that. And that's quite a revealing passage whenever you go through all of this and find out the truth of it all. And as we just said, one of them was doing vegetables and sacrificing to God, and the other one was doing cattle, and how that played out over time and who was who in that game that we're talking about now. You following me? Hopefully. Plato's Atlantis had a hot and cold springs there, and Ireland has 27 warm springs. Yeah, but it also has thousands of cold springs, known locally as holy wells, that this is sacred water in some way. And the same can be said about the ancient city in Israel and its holy well that was hooked up to it, for it has a spring, a natural spring that even in times of drought and things would sustain some people, like an oasis, your own Garden of Eden. Plato's tale also described the city of Atlantis, a huge circular city with an abundance of elephants, gold, and ivory. This is actually a reference to the ancient city of CERN. But if we say that differently, instead of CERN, which we think of nowadays as being the big collider and all the atomic things, strangely this all hooks up together, out front of which is Shiva and so on. And how does this all connect? It all connects, and it's in your face the whole time. For CERN could also be Cairn, an early Irish type settlement in Mauritania, Africa, or we can connect the genetics of the Berbers and their phenotype with the same type of people that are out here. And I've done ones on the Canary Islands and the Guanche that are there, and how they're more connected to an ancient Cro-Magnon type, which we also still call early European hunter-gatherers. But CERN is derived from that Irish word cairn, he's telling you here, which means a stacked or piled rocks. But it's not just piles of rocks. They serve extreme purposes. Cairns are also heavily associated with the Greek messenger god Hermes and his Egyptian equivalent Thoth, and Tautus the Phoenician, or Enki. The site of the city of CERN, Plato's lost city of Atlantis, is also known as the Eye of the Sahara, or Recot structure. And I did a video about this a couple of years ago, and I found out right after I did that, someone else did a video about it, and then there came out these other things about it, and I don't want to say that I'm the one that triggered it or whatever, because I got triggered by somebody else's video, and it went from there and there and there. But you can see this Recot structure and its circular rings, and people have made connections to this, and how the Sahara didn't used to be the way that it is now. But if you zoom in on Google Earth, you can find a lot of things. For there's another circular type structure that's built here, and this area that's swathed over with desert. And right below in this picture, which you're not showing, how you can tell it's just washed out and over with a desert, pretty much where the desert just smothered over it. And they say, well, it was smothered, Atlantis was smothered over with water. Well, he's trying to tell you that it's not just one place. And even Plato in the story doesn't tell you it's just one place. It's this whole people. They came in, they did this thing. So where are they now? There they are. It's the Phoenicians right there. There they are. Well, they came all the way to Libya and all past the Pillars of Hercules and into Europe, past Tyre, and they did this and everything. Okay, well, who is that? Well, if you look at the people who are living from that area back to the west in Europe, and the people that used to be right there coming to Libya, and the ancient Berbers and Amazigh hooked up to the Amazons, they were there. It's the same people. It makes other connections. Eye of the Sahara. Interestingly, in Greek history, the name CERN actually referred to two separate places, an African city near the Atlas Mountains and an island in the Atlantic Ocean somewhere that was 12 days' sail from the Strait of Gibraltar. and apparently in the other way, or straight out. Well, the Azores and stuff isn't that far straight out, so what are they talking about? Well, in 12 days, you'll never get across to Americas or anything, so what are we talking about? Well, go the other way. There's a coast, sure, but eventually there's islands about during that time, and the amount of speed that these people had in their stuff, that sounds extremely rational, just like it does to go the other way. Similarly, Plato's Atlantis was a combination of the same two separate places, the island of Atlantis, Ireland, he's saying, and the city of Atlantis, or city of CERN, of the Isle of Sahara in Mauritania. In Greek mythology, Atlas was the first king of two separate places. The island of Atlantis is the kingdom of Mauritania, Africa. The Atlas Mountains, which encircle the Eye of Sahara, still bear his name to this day. And if you look at ancient Herodotus' maps, they believe that the Nile did not come down where it does, but it actually bent back around and aims over, and right at the Atlas Mountains, it'll say Atlantis, E-S, instead of I-S. Right there. Like it's been under your nose the whole time, but people have looked at that and they go, well, that's just desert area now and everything. Well, the ancient people of Carthage and all the things that came out of that were prospering pretty well, and that's just not too long ago. Imagine whenever it was the Green Sahara, how people were doing all across North Africa, which by then, if you'll look at Herodotus' map, is just called Libya. Africa comes later. It's named after a Caucasian and blah, blah, blah. It means motherland and so on. Just like Mediterranean means Middle Earth. Not the southern part of it for these people that named everything Middle Earth. The Greek Diodorus, in his Library of History, describes how the Atlanteans were a civilized people who had a settlement called CERN near the Atlas Mountains, and that it was here that the warlike Amazons, or Amazi, a ferocious army which had female warriors from Libya, which is what they called Africa, slaughtered the Atlanteans before attacking Greece and waging war in the region. Greek history is very consistent in supporting the account of Diodorus, but not that of Plato, and it was actually the Amazons who attacked Greece, not the Atlanteans. Very much like it was Hannibal who rode across the Alps and attacked, and again, that uses elephants. So we should be able to make some connections, echoes through time that I keep using the idea out of it, but this is a painting depiction from 1620s when people weren't so PC and freaked out, and this is the departure of the Amazons on that journey and leading to that fight. Look how they look. The old Irish annals contain many records of voyages to Greece, Mauritania, and Egypt. Female Amazon warriors are also mentioned as an attempted invasion of Ireland by the Greeks and Romans, who were defeated at the Battle of Vintry in the county Kerry. Perhaps it's here on Ireland's wild Atlantic shore that Rome's famous missing Ninth Legion somehow met their demise. There are people that do history in depth that do whole video sets on this point. Look up Ninth Legion and their demise, and there's a hint always to, well, maybe here. And the Germans are mentioned sometimes and so on, but are the ancient, what would have been Proto-Germanic people. Talk about Amazons before they get off the subject here totally. Also, a lot of historians and the Greeks are mention that there are Amazons also, of course, in Proto-Indo-European lands and in that direction, and there are women who did not take any shit in that direction also, by the way. So people get confused sometimes when they mention it, like whenever they mention Ethiopia, which is spelled starting with an A, A-E-T-H, Ethiopia, and how it's not really this admixed people living near the Horn of Africa today. If you look up that same Herodotus' map, there are brown blotches everywhere, and that's actually where they said Ethiopians were living at the time. And it's really just farming villages and so on. Caucasians. Plato described how Atlantis was swallowed by the sea. This is a reference to a huge tsunami, perhaps, which decimated Stone Age Ireland. Virtually every culture on Earth has an origin story involving a great deluge, a story that was witnessed and then strengthened through trade and people having the same stories and passed around, and it kept going and evolved into these stories which led into things such as the Bible has in it. But I've made many references how the last one of those in the Bible goes exactly with the Sumerian tales of Utnapishtim and Enki, and how he tells them to build a boat, ravens, doves, the whole 9 yards, people. And a lot of people have made this connection now off of it, but some of us were making this connection when people were like, what the hell are you talking about? Anyhow, what is unique about the Irish is that they have several records of life before, during, and after this great flood. And we look at a couple of other great civilizations, they speak of such things. Egypt does the same way. Sumerians have this pre-diluvian situation. It's just right in your face. And of course, that's where it gets into the Bible idea of something that happened long, long ago, and it was never supposed to happen again, and it happened to them again. That was the second time, and God had made a promise and a rainbow in situations. And people think, oh, that's right. No, that wasn't then. That was way before. That story had been going around through all of these people for a long time. In fact, that same story echoes through all of these people and gods and the way they line up, and then it eventually turns to this god, to that god, and then the storm gods all follow suit. Some people don't make those connections. I'm here to do so. Here, light your torch off mine. Let's look at this. Let's go this way. The ancient Irish annals even contain the names of flood survivors who managed to escape by boat or survived by reaching higher ground. Pretty much that's what's left now, is the higher places, as they say in the Bible. On Ireland's western coast, there are folk tales of a giant tsunami around 12,000 years ago. Similar tales are found in Ionia, Scotland. So what could have caused this global apocalyptic event? Well, while a localized tsunami affecting Ireland could have easily been caused by an ocean earthquake or subsidence of land, in fact, we've found clear evidence of that happening and causing a forced tsunami across the land. What we're talking about, there's only one thing which could have caused a huge global event, a cosmic impact. And here we go, connecting everything with what I've been talking about for years now. The Keystone team speculate that a comet struck the Atlantic Ocean at the Puerto Rico Trench, triggering a huge tsunami, epic global rainfalls, flooding, ocean volcanoes, and earthquakes. Gravitational anomalies often signal a cosmic impact, and the most negative gravitational anomaly on Earth is situated deep in the Puerto Rico Trench. NASA scientists report that beneath the trench there is a mass so dense that its gravitational pull causes the ocean to dip, and it affects navigational instruments some. And people have tried to say, oh, that's part of the Bermuda Triangle and this, that, and the other. No, well, it's magnetromic, if you will, in that effect. But also, they're talking about this one in Puerto Rico. Other people are talking about how the fragmentary comets seem to have hit from Iceland and glaciers like Hiawatha Glacier, the glacier that we found now, and there's two others, but also on the thick, 2-mile thick continental ice shelf that was on North America, and perhaps vaporizing in the atmosphere coming into that, just scorching it as if somebody was to take and put a flamethrower across the top of it with enough kinetic force to melt it so rapidly it caused something that, well, part of the human civilization still remembers it to this day. Puerto Rico Trench is located in the infamous Bermuda Triangle. Oh, wow, I did. And is the deepest point in the entire Atlantic Ocean. The Keystone team suggests that this anomaly is a result of the comet strike around 11,600 years ago. This date perfectly matches the end of the Younger Dryas period, a time of extreme flooding and rising of sea levels, which oceanographers and geologists call meltwater pulse 1b. We've talked about this extensively. I've probably made you sick of it if you've been watching all of my videos, but it's not that I have become a catastrophist in so much of a way as I want to keep showing verifications, and all these things keep coming out for their people. And science, instead of laughing things off, it finally got behind the idea that some of this all connects. I try to show you farther ones than that. But there's evidence also for a huge tsunami that impacted the Caribbean Sea during this period. There's impacts of localized floods in this period also. And so here's a pretty good depiction of something which would have been a comet. Now, what people believe, and they try to make too many connections sometimes, perhaps, but what's to be believed is that a comet, which is huge, literally some 160 miles across, so it could be a near Earth ender, is only a piece of the larger comet, which what we find left is Comet Encke, that still orbits and flies around us today. But the remnants of its destruction and partial destruction, where part of it came off of it, but not total, as they perceive went around the sun and it shattered it. Did all the pressure it went through, and that shattering left a string, which to this day we have as the Taurus or Taurid meteor shower, and it hooks up to Halloween and Day of the Dead and so on. And you see these little falling stars and woo and everything. Well, Armageddon talks about falling stars and woo. Yeah, and in the ancient tale of Plato itself, like I said in the other one, if you change just a few words here, you can make it fit. People don't like that in any way, but sometimes it's not necessarily changing anything woo. Whenever you look at their word disaster that he uses, it actually means bad star. And I'll be damned if something like this wouldn't have been a bad star. But people look over that linguistic connection and possibility. It's like when that word's in there and there's this thesaurus, they won't choose these, they choose this one. But funny how they're actually at that moment synonymous with each other. In short, there's the scientific evidence for cataclysmic event at the time in history when many independent cultures around the world speak of a global flood. It's also at the exact same time Atlantis is said to have drowned somehow in the waters. And that pretty much ends what they're talking about here. And we're going on to part 2, Ireland is Atlantis, and I'll have that coming up too. He's got a book about that, and it's coming out, Atlantis Ireland Theory, by Anthony Woods and Keystone University, and it's now available from Amazon. And that interests me. Might have to put that on a Christmas list, huh, people? So, Atlantis and its connections. Let's just go back up here. And what would have made a place go underwater so quick was, well, if you're having a flood, just like when it rains real hard and it starts flooding around you, if you had a huge flood, or say the ocean raised up 420 meters, and you were within 420 meters elevation off the ocean, you'd sure as hell be feeling a flood. And this is echoed in different places. The people around the Black Sea and how it got inundated and changed from fresh water and taken on by the Mediterranean. And that whole culture that's lost. Woof. Well, if we look in that area right there at those Caucasus Mountains and these places where Noah landed, we find Göbekli Tepe and these places that are right around this same time too. There's a staggering that goes on for a few thousand years, but coming out of it is Catalhoyuk and things, and attached to ancient people that we now realize are the Natufians, which apparently cascaded down into the land of Jordan and so on, but also became a large component of what made up the beginning people of Egypt and all of its ancient Caucasians. And I'm going to show that to you in part 3 here. But also, they seem to have gone even farther, for in that ancient Jordan area they made all these little circles and crawls for cattle and things like that, maybe at the first burgeoning of trying to be a cowboy, if you will. And yet those cattle crawls are found in sub-Saharan Africa too, and I did a video on that, but it's been way back near Christmas time whenever they came out and showed this, where they had found them through LiDAR and through just looking at Google Earth, and you can see them. And they investigated them and figured that they go with the Neptunes people. And then somebody said, well, if you look at this group, this looks exactly like, and it's built on the same substances as all those ones. So now what are we talking about? How far of a span do we have? We've only had a few things that show Caucasians all the way down into sub-Saharan Africa. If you look the definition, though, it'll tell you that they go from all North Africa was always, and then through Egypt and through the Horn of Africa. But down at a site known as the Hofmeyr site, they very PC and vaguishly let you know that these people were Caucasians at 38 to 40,000 BC, in that range. There's another site known as Blombo's Cave, which has a red ochre setup, which is very similar to all these people in Canaanite areas and everything else, and has made some connections with who was there at that time too. But so when we talk about Ireland and things like this, generally we're talking about people who are in a certain place now, right? And a place that we've got a name for now. But Ireland name was a little different. It was Erin before that, and they have the islands of Erin, and you wonder what Aryan people are and how that does to do with everything. And the Nile used to be called the River Ar by a people that thought that it was carrying from the sun. And these people are all sun worshippers in their cosmic way that they do things, but also they thought that river Nile pretty much came from the sun. Then it was flowing from there. And if you imagine it heading towards the equator, you can maybe get that iconography. Man, it's a beautiful picture, and it makes me want to go there. You know, in that game I play Ark, this would be the place to build your little place at. And it makes me wonder again, if somebody ever stood on this point once long ago and go, this is the place to build. But I wonder if that all got taken away and swallowed up in the area that would be the lower land right now, or then, which is underwater now. And then someone else stood here who was related to them, but later, knock knock, and said, wow, this is a great place to build. For if you just look left and right and over here and over there, there are flat, straight plains that are great and fantastic places to farm. But the middle of Ireland is all looking pretty much a little like Atlantis, because there's a huge plain area and mountains that surround it, and some of the descriptions start coming to fruition a little bit. We'll get into that in part 3 though, and so it's coming up in your left hand corner. And even though this one only got to 30 minutes long, and I kind of did a little bit of stretching here to get there, we'll go into this next one, and I'll have it come exactly when we're looking at now. I'll release them simultaneously, and you'll just go through them as we go. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. And now we'll get on to connections, showing connections to North Africans and even the ancient Egyptians, Phoenicians, and these people that had boats long ago. Peace.